You can have a sole proprietorship, you can have an LLC, a corporation, a partnership. There's a lot of different ways. And from the legal side, what it does is it provides you the protection. If you do everything correctly, and sometimes, and I get a lot of cases where people, they go on the Secretary of State site, they pay the $95, and they reserve a name, and if you search them, it shows that they are an LLC or they are a corporation or whatever it might be. But they've done nothing else. They don't have bylaws. They don't have an operating agreement. You can't really tell who owns it or how they're even established. And so if in those situations, if you end up in a lawsuit, you really aren't going to have any of the protections that you thought you did. You have to do the full process to really have those protections. From a legal perspective, the idea is you create an entity that is not you. It is separate from you, so that if you do get sued or there is some issue of liability, they technically can't come after all of your personal assets. You know, is a corporation more of protection than a sole proprietorship? Not necessarily. It's more about when you're talking about the levels of protection between a sole proprietorship and an LLC, I'm always going to recommend an LLC, but there's not a lot of difference other than your sole proprietorship doesn't necessarily require the same amount of documentation and paperwork. And so because that's kind of the standard, you just don't have the same things that you generally do with an LLC or a corporation. A lot of what it comes down to with the differences is taxation. So on top of having an attorney that you can contact and you can deal with regularly, you're having your CPA who can tell you the best structure for what you're trying to do. Generally speaking, an LLC is a holding company. It can be used for a lot of different things, and people use them for all kinds of different things. I know a lot of people who their whole either property management or their business of buying and selling is all an LLC, and that's fine. You're really going to be okay if you do it that way, but an LLC is just designed to really hold things. So that's why you do see a lot of investors put their properties in an LLC. And especially if you're doing a single member LLC, it becomes kind of a pass-through entity. So you're not getting you don't have to file a separate tax return. It flows through your personal taxes. Again, I'm not a CPA, so if you have more questions about your taxes, I'm not your guy. So the reality is, you just want to make sure that when you are setting up your business, that you go to someone who's experienced in setting up businesses, that they understand what you do, any of the unique things that you might do that you want to make sure that you are either protected for, or I guess for me, when someone comes in and wants to set up a business, we sit down and we talk about, okay, so right now you want to buy some properties, but what's the next step? What are you going to do? Because sometimes it's, okay, the LLC works perfectly, but if it's, well, I want to set up an LLC to buy some properties, but next month I'm hiring an employee. I've got a maintenance guy who's going to be my full-time employee. Well, LLCs aren't great for employees, so then you may want to look at starting a corporation and being an S corp, which also helps with that pass-through taxation. But it's really just making sure that you have the documentation that's appropriate for your needs and your entity. It's not so much about how you put things in your not so much about what you would put a house into or an investment property into, but if you've got a partnership, if you've got something with that involves a bunch of other people, or maybe just one partner, whether it's family or it's your best friend, there's a lot of documents that you want to make sure you have. Your buy-sell agreements. The ugliest cases I see are the family members. It's a father, son, two brothers. They run a business together, and they say, well, we're family, we love each other, we don't need any of these documents. And then the shit hits the fan, and they're out for blood, and it gets ugly. So generally speaking, an LLC is probably the best for holding real estate in. I get questions all the time about, I want to put each property, I own 15 houses, and I want to put each one of them in a different LLC. This is 120 Main Street LLC, and this is 125 Main Street LLC, and you have a very small amount of money in each of those, but then you've got some master account somewhere, or you even set up a different account for each of these properties where you keep money. That's a great way to have the veil pierced. So that's a great way to have your personal assets involved in a lawsuit, because if the court feels or determines that you are hiding assets, or you are using the corporate structure or the company structure to limit your liability, and you're not really funding your business. When you split it up like that, if you really only use the assets that you have in each LLC for that individual property, you might be okay, but usually that's not the case. You've got your individual LLCs, and even if you have those bank accounts, but you're pulling money from somewhere else. And that's where, if there's a good attorney on the other side, they'll do all the discovery, and they'll find out where the funds are coming from and what they're doing. And it's a lot of times, if the judge isn't totally sure, if it's confusing, we have good judges in DeKalb County, but they don't deal with this stuff a lot. And so they're going to get confused, and they're going to say, yeah, I think we need to see your personal assets. I think they're going to be involved, because I can't really tell where all the funds came from, and where it just looks like there's something fishy about this. And so they're going to say, well, we're at least going to put it on the table and we're going to move forward. So you have to be careful. It's a rare situation where that happens, but the more you do things that makes a judge kind of say, I know there's something there, the more likely you're going to have issues. And so that's not to say you can't legitimately have a different LLC for every property, but you've got to be very, very careful about tracking every penny that goes in and comes out, and making sure that you can account for them, because otherwise you're going to get yourself into trouble.